we talk about women of color earning the seat. And then once we're there, again, we discover that attendance and influence are not the same thing. You think, oh, I'm in the room. That means I got a little pull. No, that's not what that means. That just means you're in the room. Welcome to the Climb Podcast, where we are diving into taboo topics and redefining the rules for women of color leaders. Get ready as we share the stories and amplify the voices of extraordinary women of color. From navigating workplace challenges to celebrating triumphs, on this podcast, we've got you covered. So buckle up and join us as we embark on today's empowering journey. Welcome to the Climb Podcast, where we empower women of color in the pursuit of leadership and management roles. I'm your host, Felicia Smith. I'm the founder of The Climb. And we each week get together to pull back the curtain on the workplace realities that women of color face, offering honest conversation, practical insights, and really being able to help you to navigate the broken rung and build the confidence you need to keep climbing, but not just climbing by yourself, but climbing as a community. And so the topic for today is you're in the room, but are you in the conversation? So before I start with the topic, welcome to season 7. We have been journeying for 7 seasons, that's 70 episodes. I think season 6 was one of the best, and I think season 7 is just going to build on that. So the best is yet to come. You heard us talk about last season, all about being in the room and the things that we don't know. So today we're going to break it down even more. So, okay, you've gotten in the room. Are you in the conversation? Which I think is a question that we don't ask. So a lot of times we talk about women of color earning the seat. And then once we're there, again, we discover that attendance and influence are not the same thing. So let's talk about it right now. Attendance and having a seat and influence are not the same thing. You know, being present in a room doesn't automatically make you influential, which is something they don't talk about, right? You think, oh, I'm in the room. That means I got a little pull. No, that's not what that means. That just means you're in the room, right? So women who often advance um, are the smartest person in the room or maybe the hardest worker, and they know how to contribute, but they may not know how to contribute in that room strategically, communicate with authority, and shape conversations. And so all of that technical expertise that you learned in your career and coming up doesn't necessarily translate in this room where there's a lot of strategy and understanding and perceptions and all these other things going on. So have you ever left a meeting and you thought to yourself, I was there the whole time, but I don't think anybody remembers that I was there. Or you thought to yourself, I had something to say, but I didn't really know what the right moment was. Or, which is even worse, someone else said exactly what I was thinking, but they got credit for it because you just weren't sure or you didn't speak up. And so today we're talking about the biggest career lessons really that no one teaches you when you get to that level. And that is being in the room, being in the conversation, two different things, right? That's the premise. And so many women of color, we spend years, and I told you about my journey, focusing on getting the right credentials, doing all the great work, proving ourselves and thinking, in some ways earning access. But nobody teaches us that to what to do once we get the access, right? So we earn the access. People think, okay, Felicia, you're smart enough to get there. We're gonna let you there. But then I get there and no one teaches you, okay, so now I'm here. What do I do with this access? Because leadership really isn't just about getting invited, right? It's about contributing in a way that's really going to shape the outcomes. So let's go ahead and jump into our first segment. And our first segment is Somebody Should Have Told Me. And we always talk about things that we wish we would have known that would have gotten us further in our journey. So I'm going to start with story time because there are a lot of things people should have taught me that I didn't know. But this is actually a recent one. I started a new role not too long ago. And in starting the role, my initial thought was, we're meeting with all of our stakeholders, and I need to be a part of these meetings, because I want to get FaceTime. I want them to know that I'm there. I want them to get, acquainted and familiar with me. Now, my premise, great premise, right? I want to be out there. I want them to know if they need X, Y, and Z, call Felicia Smith. Boom. So I go to these meetings, and a month pass, and 2 months pass. And I'm realizing that some of these meetings, number one, they're not covering topics that are in my area. And as a result, I'm just there in this meeting, right? I'm not saying anything. I'm just a little smiling black face, right? So finally I said to myself, and I was talking to a colleague, they're like, "Hey, you're going to go attend XYZ meeting." And I said, "Well, you know what? It doesn't need to be both of us. Like, one of us can attend, doesn't need to both. Well, you sure you don't want to attend?" And I said, "You know what? As I think about this, as I reflect on everything that I tell women on this podcast, what I am doing in this meetings was not strategic visibility. I am just there in the room." And to the question that we talked about earlier, I don't know that anybody even recognizes my face or would have known that I wasn't there, because I was not adding value and I didn't have influence because I was just in the room. And so people who have influence, like we said before, often aren't the people who are talking the most, but when a person has influence. So in that case, for me being in those rooms, I didn't have any influence. Like, I knew by the way that the conversation was going. Let me tell you how you know. This isn't even a part of what I was going to talk to, but I'm going to tell you how you know if you're in a meeting and you probably don't have influence. If it's a meeting of 4 or less people, and in that meeting, no one ever addressed you, you don't got no influence in that room. If they're having a conversation, they're like, "Hey, Jan, I want to talk to you, blah, 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 blah." Or you get on the call and you're like, "Hey, I'm here." And they're like, "Is Jan coming?" Right? That means that Jan is the person who has the influence and who they want to talk to. Now, can you build influence in that room? Absolutely. And there's strategies to get there. But the premise of that room in that moment tells you that you do not have pull. So that's something that you need to know, right? So although you may not be the person always talking, you will know if you have the pull or not, right? So someone should have taught me and a lot of people that the goal isn't airtime. Again, I'm in there, airtime. Hi. That's not the goal. The goal is influence. So your presence isn't just enough. That's a common misconception. We just believe that if I, again, do good work, people going to notice. I did the good work, I'm in the room, they're noticing me. No. Let's go back to basics, season 6. Organizations reward what? Visibility, influence, strategic thinking, decision making, not just execution, right? So when you think about a meeting, there are kind of 3 levels. And y'all know I did my 3s in season 6. We're going to keep it going in season 7. So there are 3 levels um, of when you're at these meetings. So level 1 is just attendance, right? I'm physically there. I'm present. I'm probably looking good. Everyone knows I'm in the room. I introduce myself. Now I'm a person. Level 1, just presence. Level 2 is participation. That's you are contributing. A question comes up, you turn on your mic. If you're on the computer, you're like, "Yes, Dan, this is the answer to that question." Or, "Yes, Dan, I was talking to my team and da 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 da." Or, "I believe for what we're discussing, we need to go XYZ," right? That is participation. That's when you're contributing. People are looking to you. You got nods. Okay, good. Now you're not just a person who's sitting in the room. Now you are bringing contributions, right? So they're like, "Oh, Felicia's not at the meeting. She's actually adding to the meeting." That's level 2. Level 3, influence. That's when what you are sharing in that meeting is shaping outcomes. It's changing the way that organization, that project, what have you, looks. And at some point, you want to get to level 3. where when you are having a conversation, you are shaping outcomes. And I know sometimes that's challenging because if we're honest, that doesn't happen on the first meeting. Like I told you, I probably did the little hi for several months, probably a quarter before I said, this isn't working for me. And so I had to come up with a different strategy. But you want to get to level 3, where you are helping to shape outcomes. Because remember, the goal is not attendance, it is influence. So let's talk about the influence gap, right? Um, Many of us, again, work hard, be humble, don't draw attention, which now we're going to do all opposites of those, and let your work speak for itself. Now, how many of y'all have heard that? I'm going to let my work speak for itself. I'm telling you, that is such a misnomer. We're going to throw that out in 2026, 27. Let your work, your thoughts, your actions, your body, your mouth, all of that's going to speak for itself, right? Because when you get into executive spaces, they operate completely different. People just don't evaluate what did she do? They evaluate how does she think? Can she see around the corner? Does she understand the business or the organization? Does she move conversations forward? Because here's the thing, silence is often interpreted as uncertainty, lack of perspective, lack of confidence, even when none of those things are true. Perception becomes reality. And we're going to cover perception this season because I don't think people really understand the power of perception and how it plays in. And we want to say that it's not true, but that does not change the influence and impact that it has on a situation. And so whether it's true or not, when you're just silent, this is how it's interpreted, whether it's true or not. And so let's talk about what I'm going to call the strategic participation framework. So before every meeting, I want you to ask yourself, and you know what? I've probably moved to the next segment. Excuse me, guys. We're going to go on the truth is. So we talked about the truth. Now we're going to talk about how you want to think about every meeting. And if you got a pen, write it down. I'm going to try to post some things on social so you can see it, but I may not. So write it down, pause it, clip it, whatever works for you. So before every week, every meeting, ask yourself this question: how will I contribute? Not what if I get called on? Because everyone's just nervous about, oh my gosh, if they call my name, am I going to say something stupid? You're not. You're a professional. You know how to speak. You know how to think and breathe and move. And so instead of thinking, what if I get called on? Think about how will I get contribute? How will I contribute to the conversation? Excuse me. What insights do you have? Right? Think about that. What are you seeing that others may not being seen? And I think this is where we get caught the most. I'm going to say women of color, but I think it's women in general. We often think that sometimes of our most innovative thoughts that the room already knows it. Well, they already know that. I don't know why I should say that. And sometimes the room doesn't see it. There have been times that I have thought something, didn't say it, and then when we got to the next level, it was something that was identified. And I thought, ooh, I should have said that. Now, there have been times where I've said it, they didn't take my opinion or my thoughts, and it still came back around. But you have to trust when you have an insight that it is something that's going to move the needle forward. So if you're seeing something that's not been said, you can even say, like, hey, maybe this has already been discussed and I missed it, but I was thinking, because then that preferences as maybe it was. If it was, they can say, yeah, Felicia, we discussed that last meeting, you weren't there, da, da, da. Or they're going to say, you know what? We didn't think about that point. But you have to allow yourself to identify the things that you're seeing that others may not have seen. And that means we have to be a little confident in our thoughts, right? Part 2, you have to ask yourself the question of, how can I simplify a problem? How can I connect the dots? How can I help people to understand something better? And so this, I'm going to tell you, is my jam. It's my sweet spot. I spend a lot of time thinking about, okay, I know this person has this piece, this person has that piece. How does all of that come together? Because often experts think in silos. They think about their thing, But strategic leaders who are thinking outside of the box are thinking about how the whole picture comes together. And not just how the whole picture comes together, how can I help somebody else to understand how that picture comes together? What can I tell them? What diagram can I show them? How can I show them the connections and why said thing is important? And this is my jam as a person who's big on strategy and change management. I'm always thinking about showing that. And then part three is how can I move the conversation forward? And how can I help the group to decide? And this is so important because oftentimes we just get stuck, right? And so this is not coming to the meeting already deciding what the decision should be. That's you helping to move the group forward and maybe asking some curious questions or things that the group should be considering. And so again, what points, right? How do I move the conversation forward? How do I help the group decide? And helping the group decide may mean that that you bring in more data points. It could mean that you, instead of just saying, "Hey, what the group is," you think about COAs. Or you look at the slides before the meeting and you say, okay, these courses of action, there's three of them, but maybe there's a hybrid that's not shown there. Again, that goes back to part two of connecting dots that maybe others don't see. So how do you bring that full picture together for somebody who doesn't see that picture? Because influential people don't wait to be invited into the conversation. They look for opportunities to improve the conversation. So that's what we're really talking about here is you going into a meeting with intention with all of those three parts and figuring out how you can improve the discussion and how you can move the organization forward for what you are an expert in, because you are already expert in a lot of things. I was talking to someone and I told them like, hey, at your level, the expectation is not that you know every detail. It's the ability for you to be able to bring it all together in big picture, connect the dots, and help those teams to grow and move forward. No one expects you to know the lowest level, how to do, the sausage making, but we do expect you to be able to like bring it together. And you have to trust yourself that from all the years and all the training that you know how to do that. And so that's a big piece. Like, how do you improve the conversation? I feel like I just went off on a tangent, but maybe I didn't. You'll tell me later. All right. So our final segment, another wrong mended. I'm going to give you a practical challenge, right? So before your next meeting, I want you to write something down. I want you to write down one question that you're going to ask, one insight that you'll share, and one way you'll move the conversation forward. Then track what happens, right? I want you to do that in before the meeting, do some of the things we discussed in the meeting, and then reflect on what impact you had in that discussion. I think one of the things that no one tells people in general, but particularly women of color, is that some of it really is practicing, right? Practice does make perfect. And so giving yourself the time and the space to learn it, reflecting on what happened in a conversation, going back to it. I spend a lot of time in reflection, even when I don't want to, because I'm often like, I'll have a conversation and then on the drive home, I'm thinking about what happened that day. What did I perceive? What did not perceive? Or, oh, I think I kind of missed that. And in reflection, you may discover that you have more to contribute than you think, right? So here's the truth. Many women believe that the hardest part is getting in the room. And sometimes the harder part is learning how to use your voice once you're there. Do I need to say that again? That's actually kind of powerful. Let me see. Sometimes the harder part than just getting in the room is learning how to use your voice once you're there. Because leadership isn't measured by attendance, it's measured by contribution, it's measured by influence, it's measured by whether your presence changes the conversation. So, next time you're in the room, ask yourself, am I just attending this conversation? Which sometimes that's going to happen. or am I helping to shape it? That's the pod. I hope that all of this was helpful to you. And if you know a woman who is asking herself these questions in real time, I want you to share this episode with her. I'm also asking that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, our podcast station, wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, which is next week, Wednesday, keep striving, keep climbing, and I'll see you next time. We talk about women of color earning the seat. We talk about women of color earning the seat. Thanks for tuning into the Climb podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on wherever you listen to podcasts. For updates and behind-the-scenes content, make sure you're following us on Instagram and LinkedIn at Join the Climb. Until next time, keep climbing and keep thriving, sis. See you next episode.